telling us real clearly, writing it on a rock, he made it all in 6 days.
What's the context before and after?
He's talking about the Sabbath. Honor the Sabbath because in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in the midst. So he's just giving the commandments. It's commandment 4.
Sure, but that I've actually known Christians before who have said things like, well, maybe you wouldn't think they were Christians, but they claim they were Christians. Who said things like, that's sort of a microcosm of the creation event. If it took however much time was a quote day, a yom, or whatever for the creation event, that it's just kind of like projecting down into our week. It's kind of a scaling, and then it's just really referring to the number and the cycle of that number.
Well, if God could do it in 6 billion years, why not 6 days?
That's obviously, if there is a creator God and he's omnipotent, he can do all this awesome stuff. He could have. The question is, did he?
Sure. All right, I understand. Mm-hmm. Well, here's what I found the quote. James Barr, professor of Hebrew at Vanderbilt University and former Regius professor of Hebrew at Oxford University, said, and I quote, probably, so far as I know, there is no professor of Hebrew of Old Testament at any world-class university who does not believe that the writers of Genesis 1 through 11 intended to convey to their readers the idea that creation took place in a series of 6 days, which were the same as the days of 24 hours we now experience. Or to put it negatively, the apologetic arguments which suppose the days of creation to be long eras of time, the figures of years not to be chronological, and the flood merely a local Mesopotamian flood, are not taken seriously by such scholars as far as I know.
Okay, so if I found a serious scholar at like Tel Aviv University that disagrees with that, what would you say?
Well, the question is not what does the scholar believe, but does the scholar believe the authors meant that?
I see your point, absolutely. It's definitely about the intent of the author. Because
right.
If they say something that they knew wasn't true, then they're basically lying to people, and then it takes the entire credibility of the Bible into question, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, have you heard of the Timothy test, Jared?
Not that one.
It's really going through and looking at the most simple, basic, straightforward interpretation. If I say, this is the first day with an evening and the morning, what's the most simplest, straightforward interpretation you're going to have?
Oh, clearly Ken Hovind.
Well, yeah, 6 days, right?
Yeah.
So, the clear interpretation, the clear reading of Genesis says 6 days that we would understand. As being 6 normal days. So, and even when you're in that debate, Dr. Hovind, with Hugh Ross and John Ankerberg, they kept referring to Gleason Archer, who's one of the leading, Hebrew scholar guys, corrects the lexicon, but he believes that the earth is billions of years old, right, or at least entertains that. But he still admits, and I read this in Refuting Compromise, a direct quote from Gleason Archer saying that the clear teaching of Genesis, if you're not trying to figure out some philosophical twist to it or something, the clear teaching is 6 24-hour days, just like we would think today. So, even the biggest, most prominent, older creationists still think the clear teaching is 6 24-hour days. But they say there's just something more to it that we just...
Only because they've been taught evolution first. Mm-hmm. And now they're trying to blend it.
Perhaps. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. There's 2 more things I would say about the Bible on this issue. One of them is there are a lot of things about ancient languages, specifically ancient Hebrew, that we'll probably never know, because that language per se is dead. Nobody has written or spoken that specific dialect of Hebrew for thousands of years.
Now, if God promised to preserve His Word, though, would we expect to have it preserved?
It's preserved to some extent, right?
Well, if He promised to preserve it, it says, the words of God are pure. They're profitable for doctrine, correction, reproof. If that's really God's perspective on, His Word, then I doubt He's going to have any corruption in there.
Okay.
Why go to the problem of writing it if you're not going to preserve it for every generation?
And, of course, that you have to have that a priori assumption that God is real and He did preserve His Word. So, I'll readily admit that.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say is that I've met some Christians that think that this is just poetry, and I never was able to swallow that. Mm-hmm. But these people do exist. Do you think these people aren't Christians?
I said they're still Christians.
I don't know who's a Christian and who's not. I can't be the judge of that. But I know since so many references from Jesus indicating he believed the creation of Adam was the beginning, there are probably 50 references in the Bible to the deep. We've got to go. We'll call it tomorrow. We'll finish this. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.